Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dr. Holly and I'm a clinical psychologist in the NHS. And today we are going to be talking about writing your best DClinPsy application. It is September 2025. That means applications are open. So we're going to go through all of our top tips about how you can write your absolute best version of your DClinPsy application. So, firstly, before we start, I just want to talk a little bit about our available resources that can help you in this endeavour of writing your best application. While all of our stuff is always going to be free on YouTube, we do have some resources that you can purchase. Again, some of them are free and some of them are paid. So, firstly is our DClinPsy Applications Handbook. It has been updated for this year, and this one is one that is available for free. If you drop me an email, no questions asked. I really do believe about widening access. It just means that if you are able to purchase it for £2.50, you're able to support the channel, which is really, really helpful. And in the DClinPsy Applications Handbook, it goes through loads of the stuff that we talk about in this video, but in a lot more detail. So it goes through what the personal statements look like, the course questions, how to write your application. It gives you spaces that you can kind of think about things and reflect and jot things down. And they are available as PDF downloads. And as of September 2025, I have a very small number of physical copies still available as well. So I will put the links down in the description. The one that is also new for this year, we have two DClinPsy course comparison guides. This is the only resource that we make, and probably will ever make, that you must pay for, I'm afraid. I'm really sorry. And the reason for that is because it took me hours to make. The DClinPsy course comparison guide is a huge document that details lots of different courses. It goes through your eligibility for the DClinPsy, just the basics of all the courses. Are you actually eligible to apply? Just making sure, because let's not waste your money if you're not. It goes through different courses, all of the different courses that you can apply to. There is an NHS version and a self-funded version as well. And it also gives you space to think about, okay, this is course 1. These are all the things that are important to me. Course 2, course 3, and you can compare it. The other thing that you get with this, the thing that's taken the most time, is the spreadsheet. So you get a kind of matrix spreadsheet that has all of the different courses on with all of the different requirements and how they do their assessments, do they have exams, how do they do their interviews, do they have extra, interview things, and you can compare each course. So you can tick which course you want, you can personalize it, and all of that information is available freely on the internet. So that is exactly why we had to charge for that one. Firstly, it took loads of time. Secondly, any of you could create that resource as well. So it's all freely available information, but if you want it all in one place, that's the place to get it. So there are our main resources, but we do have a range of other ones as well, but I'll link down the shop in below. So let's move on to the basics. Okay, the DClinPsy is a 3-year full-time doctorate program in clinical psychology, and the exit award is DClinPsy. So they are often the letters after your name. It might be DClinPsych, it might be, DCP, it might be other things. That's usually what it is. And currently there are 32 universities that offer a DClinPsy course in the UK. You can apply for 30 of those courses if you're NHS funded through Clearinghouse, and directly to 2 courses, which are the University of Hull and Queen's University Belfast. So for Hull, you have to have, I think, unless they changed it, you have to have done your psychology undergraduate degree at either Hull or York universities. You have to be in your 3rd year. You have to have got a certain amount in the clinical psychology module, and then you are eligible to apply for those courses. So do double check whether you are able to or not. The DClinPsy programme lasts for 3 years, as I said, and it consists of teaching alongside clinical placements. So teaching usually follows academic terms, like most universities will, and often you will have 2 days teaching with 3 days placement every week, but it does vary. Some courses will give you a study day every week, but your teaching continues through summer. Some won't, and teaching blocks vary on the courses. So often they will start the course with a teaching block. Some courses that is 12 weeks, some courses it's 4, some courses it's 6. It really depends. So they are that's the basic stuff about the DClinPsy. And as I say, it's a 3-year full-time programme. There is one course that offers a part-time option, and I think that's Lancaster. I don't think there's any others that offer one at the moment. So, the basics of the application. You can only apply one time per year, in September to November. that is when applications are open for Clearinghouse. You can apply to a maximum of 4 courses through Clearinghouse. And NHS places are publicly funded. So this means that course fees and your salary are paid by Higher Education England, National Education for Scotland, or the Welsh Government, depending on where you study. And self-funding is available for a handful of courses. But if you're NHS funded, you're paid on an Agenda for Change Band 6 salary. So we're really, we're well paid to be training. There is a standardised application form on Clearinghouse, and to apply via Clearinghouse does cost money. If you apply in the first month, so there's usually sometime in mid-October, then you can save £10 usually on the application fee. But if you wait till kind of November time, whenever the application's closed, in sort of mid to late November, you'll be paying the full price. Here's the timeline then. So September is when applications open via Clearinghouse. November is when they close, and everything has to be in by then. And also if you're applying to Queen's Belfast, this is when your application deadline is. In March, the deadline is for courses to feed back the application outcomes to you. So that is quite a long time, particularly if you apply really early in September. That is, sort of 6 months of waiting. So that can be quite a long time. And between March and May is when the courses do their interviews. And also this is when the whole application deadline is. So between March and May, the courses will run several different interview days that you'll be invited to or not. And then June is usually the deadline to accept places. So that is kind of what the timeline looks like. If you've applied before, or if you've watched any of our videos, you will know this already. So they are that's the basic information about it. I want to talk a little bit about preparing to apply, because I'm a big believer, for me anyway, all my platform advice is always about what's worked for me. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But what worked for me was really, in my successful year, was really focusing on what I wanted to say and giving a lot of time to that preparation before I started writing anything. And I should say, if you're new to the channel, I applied 6 times. I managed to get on and qualified in 2024. So it does happen, and it also doesn't mean that you have to apply 6 times. Lots of people do not apply that many times. But I have lots of experience of doing the application, and my successful year, I spent the most time preparing rather than actually writing it. So, choosing a course then. There's a few different ways that you can go about choosing a course, or your 4 courses if you're going to apply to 4. Firstly, ethos and values. And this is, usually there will be a section on Clearinghouse or their website, or in our course comparison guide that you can see, that shows what their ethos and values are. Sometimes that's quite hard to find, but this is usually what the course sees as important in training. So it could be things like kind of the therapeutic models that they're using, like systemic or psychodynamic, or it could be other aspects like embedding people with lived experience throughout the course in a really meaningful way. And what's important is to think about what your values are. Like, what do you think is important in training, and what kind of clinical psychologist do you want to be? Because if those things are misaligned already, you're probably going to have a difficult time over the 3 years. Secondly is location. So you will be living and working there for the next 3 years. And due to the spread of courses, so the courses all cover, all areas of the UK, pretty much, I believe. And due to the spread of courses, you may need to relocate. You may not be able to relocate. There may be reasons that you can't relocate. So I was bound by location, so I had to apply to the closest ones. Fortunately, they did kind of match my ethos and values and things like that, and it worked. But that isn't always, the way. So if you are needing to relocate, or location is going to be an issue, I would definitely think about what are the course arrangements for staying away, if they have any. So my course did not have any. There was no provision for you staying away. That just wasn't an option. Do the course have any requirements for location? So some courses specify that you have to live in a certain place. Some don't. So it's really important to think about those things. And then selection. So how do these courses actually choose their candidates for interview? How do they do that? And playing to your strengths. So the first few times I applied to lots of courses that did shortlisting tests. as a way of kind of, before they look at the application, they'll do shortlisting tests like deductive reasoning or, anything like that. Situational judgment, I think, is another one. But that was absolutely not my strength. And in the later years, when I had more experience, I could apply to those courses that valued experience. But in the early years, I didn't really have any experience, certainly not in the same way that I did 6 years in. So it was changing my application based on the strengths that I had at the time. So if your strength is your academic record, if you've got a first and a distinction and you passed your PhD and you had all A's at A-level or equivalent, applying to courses that shortlist using academic criteria is probably a good thing to do. If your strength is the amount of experience you have, applying to courses where there's a minimum experience requirement could be good. If you actually don't have any experience, really, there are courses that will still accept you, just having a look at which courses they are and maximising your chances of getting on. So it's really choosing a course that is going to help you. Let's think about the basic requirements then of preparing to apply. Basic entry requirements. So there are some basic ones across pretty much all of the courses. Graduate basis for chartership. This is from the British Psychological Society, the BPS, and it can be gained from a degree accredited by the BPS, including conversion courses. So this is something I get asked all the time, is I'm not a graduate member of the BPS, does that mean I can't apply? No, it's literally not about that. It's not graduate membership. It is just a kind of tick box that you've done a degree of some description, undergrad or conversion, that gives you, yes, they have learned the very basics that is needed for somebody to go on to do further training in psychology. So that's all it is. You do not need to be a member of the BPS. Do not subscribe if you don't want to, because that is a cost as well, and arguably, who knows what you get for your money. So yes, you do not need to be a member. You don't need to do that. You just need to have something that proves it, and we'll come to that when we come to documents. You need to have some relevant clinical experience. As I say, there are a very small number of courses that don't have a minimum. Most will have a minimum amount of time that you need to have in clinical experience. So it could be 6 months, it could be 9, 12 months. So definitely checking those things to make sure that you actually do meet that basic requirement. Academic record. So some courses specify that you have to have had a minimum of a 2-1 in your accredited degree, the degree that gives you your graduate basis for chartership. If you've done a conversion, sometimes they also want you to have a 2-1 in your undergrad, your first degree as well. So it's really worth checking, do you meet those criteria? Because if you don't, you'll simply not be shortlisted. So again, don't waste your time applying to a course where you don't meet the basic criteria. And some courses now, this has definitely been a change since I applied between 2015 and 2021, is that some courses now require you to have a driving licence. Evidence of which you may have to attach to your application. So it has to be a UK valid driving licence, not necessarily UK pass in the UK, but you have to have a driving licence that allows you to be able to drive in the UK. And some courses also specify that you have to have access to a motorbike or a car. So it's really worth checking that as well. Again, there may be, I think the courses are allowed to do this unless you have a disability and or health condition that precludes you from driving. In which case, that's a separate conversation, and you can explain that on your application. And you shouldn't be, judged harshly that they can't not shortlist you because of that. So yes, they are the basic requirements for most of the courses, but all of the courses will have their own different kind of basic entry requirements. Always check Clearinghouse and the course websites for each course to understand their criteria. You can also find it in our course comparison guide. We have taken great care in making sure that it's all in there. Let's think about the references then. So you need to have, and they call them suitability statements. For the application, you need to have 2 suitability statements. These are standard forms that both referees will fill in. So you have one academic reference, and this is somebody who can comment on your academic ability to perform at a doctorate level. So usually this is some form of academic supervisor that you will have had during one of your degrees. And they should be from an academic institution where possible. Sometimes people have NHS or clinical research jobs, in which case usually someone would potentially be able to give you that reference, but typically they like it to be from a university, .ac.uk address, usually. Then an experience reference is something you need, and the experience referee really needs to have direct experience of and be able to comment on your performance in a relevant clinical context and or research context if appropriate. Ideally, this is a clinical psychologist, and that is only because part of the form says, will they be able to do clinically undergo training? And other forms of mental health professional would be able to provide you a reference, but they haven't done the same training. So it's quite hard that it doesn't really carry the same value quite often as if a clinical psychologist has done it. Ideally, it should be your current employer. If not, there is a section in the course questions where you can explain it. So, for example, if you've only been in your new role 2 weeks or something, and actually your previous supervisor is the best person to comment, that is usually fair. The other thing to say is that some courses do have specific requirements as to who can provide a reference. So make sure you check each page on Clearinghouse / their website. A really common question I get is, if I don't have a referee for my academic or my clinical, what do I do? Ultimately, you need to find one. So quite often people will say that, my master's supervisor is no longer there. What do I do? Well, that's really tricky. And one of the things I say is try and contact the university. So actually we'll come to this now. Contact the university from which you obtained your most recent and or relevant psychology degree to see if anyone there can provide a reference. Or you can also email them saying, look, hello, I was supervised by this person. Do you have a forwarding email address for them? I'm trying to get a reference. That can help, definitely. And it's something I would do early. So if you don't have a reference and you're coming to submit your application, it's almost too late. So you need to find that referee ASAP. So start emailing. If you have any questions about references, suitability statements, contact Clearinghouse or the university directly to ask their advice if they have any questions. So one of the things that you do on the application is you put in your referee's details, and then the reference request is emailed to them directly. You don't have to have that on your application before you submit it. Ideally you should, but usually the referees have got until about January to get them in. But I would make sure it's much better to have it as a fully completed application. Thinking more about preparing to apply and how you want to, what you want to come across in your application, I recommend writing a few lists. And you may not include any of this or all of this in the final application draft, but this step can be really helpful to get you thinking about things. Firstly, the biggest lessons you've learned so far. So what actually have you learned since graduating? What have you learned clinically and in terms of research? Like, what are the biggest things that you've learned? Why do you want to be a clinical psychologist? And why do you want to train at those courses that you've chosen? Why? Why do you want to do it? Because actually that is quite a common interview question as well. Is why do you want to be a clinical psychologist, particularly rather than another mental health professional? So really thinking about what it is about being a clinical psychologist that you want to do. Have a good, clear idea of that. And then thinking about the competencies so far. So on the Clearinghouse website, there is a trainee job description and person specification. So I'd check how much of those competencies you're kind of hitting. Like, how much of that do you meet? Just like you would do for any other job application. Which bits of training do your experiences prepare you for? So, do you have loads of clinical experience, loads of different patient groups, and loads of MDT working? Well, what's that going to prepare you for in training? It's going to prepare you for placement. It's going to massively prepare you for placement. It's going to be very, very helpful for teaching because you have lots of seminars and conversations and discussions. And drawing on previous experience is really valuable. There's a couple of things right there. That's really, really helpful. So thinking about all the bits of experience and the biggest lessons you've learned so far and how they map onto each individual bit of training. That's what I would think about. And what are you looking forward to about training? Why do you want to train? Because there's one thing about why do you want to be a clinical psychologist, but why do you want to be a trainee? Because being a trainee, in my experience, was so much harder than being a qualified psychologist for lots of reasons that I've talked about before. But what exactly is it on training that you're really looking forward to? Just having a think about that, because it can actually get you really motivated and excited to write the application, rather than perhaps a bit anxious and just thinking, okay, what do they want me to say? Just thinking about these things yourself before can get you into that space where you kind of know why you're writing the application. Let's get into writing the application then. So you've done some preparation. Here is what you will face when you come into Clearinghouse. Actually, the layout looks slightly different now because they've changed the website, but all the details are still the same. So you will need to put in your details, your name, the date of birth, your address, and funding-wise, what kind of funding level you're going for. So do you have UK work eligibility? What's your nationality? Are you able to self-fund? Those sorts of things. You'll be asked to put in your course centres, and there's no ranking system. It's just whichever 4. And I think they all have a code, and they're usually done alphabetically. So even if, for example, you wanted to apply to Bath, and Bath was like your 4th choice, not that it matters because you're not ranking them, Bath would always come at the top if it's the earliest one in the alphabet. Does that make sense? And the basics. So you will need to put in how you obtained your graduate basis for chartership. So that's usually either your undergrad or your conversion degree. So you need to put in, you just need to state how you gained it. Your language abilities, so what's your first language? Do you have any additional languages that you're able to speak? And also they'll ask you about disability. We're going to go through all these sections, by the way, in a minute. The suitability statements that they're now called, so not references, but suitability statements. So you need to put in the details of your referees. Qualifications, these include some school qualifications and then university qualifications. Your experience, so that's kind of occupational research and other experience, any roles that you've had. And then the personal statements, which are now called course questions. So there are 6 standardised questions. Some, yes. And then, course questions. And then related to eligibility to train as well. So confirming that you've not completed an NHS-funded course in the last 2 years, that sort of thing. You'll need to attach documents, and they should tell you which documents you need to attach, but it's probably worth, when you know which courses you're applying to, just having a list and making sure that you're attaching the right documents. And then equal opportunities, so consent and demographic information. Let's think about course centres then. So as I've said, our course comparison guide for NHS and self-funded places is available, and you need to put in which courses you want to apply to on the form. So there's a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 4. I do definitely know of people that have applied to 1 because they live in South Wales, they want to go to South Wales, that's where they're going. And then, they don't want to apply anywhere else. Most people will apply to 4 though. As I say, there's no first choice or ranking system, and you can change them at any point before you submit your application. Each course will be designed differently to other courses and can teach quite a wide range of modalities and topics, so it's important to think about, and their ethos as well, it's important to think about those things. The basics. Again, you will have to put in how you obtained your graduate basis for chartership, your English language proficiency. So language is an interesting thing. If you have home fees status, so you're applying for an NHS funded place, but your home country is not the UK or another English speaking country, all the universities have got completely different English language requirements and what they'll accept. So usually if you have done a degree in an English-speaking country and it was examined in English and taught in English, then usually you won't need to do any additional English language proficiency tests or prove that you can speak English properly and do it in terms of the academic and examined in it. So if you haven't done that, then you might need to. So that is one of the things on our course comparison spreadsheet that took so much time, is going through all of the different courses and what their English language proficiency rules were. So I'd definitely spend some time thinking of that if any of that applies to you. Disability, you have to disclose or not whether you consider yourself to have a disability. You don't have to. That was a poor choice of words. You don't have to. Quite often you can say, prefer not to say, and that's absolutely fine. Then driving licence, as I say, some might require you to say whether you can drive or not. Whether you've got a full UK valid driving licence, and you might need to attach proof of that. Qualifications then. So this is usually quite a quick section. You're just listing all of your qualifications from A-level or equivalent. So you have to put in the course title, the institution where you studied it, the year obtained, and the grade obtained as well. You don't need to list any mandatory training or continuous professional development courses here unless they have provided you with a qualification. So if you've done, a day's training in, or, the training to do an EMDR and you're a qualified EMDR therapist, you'd probably put that in there in the other qualification section. But otherwise, you don't need to put that you have done a day on safeguarding adults, for example. Experience then. So this is where you list your paid and voluntary work experiences. For each role, the format follows like this. You have to do the date from, so when you started the role, date to, when you finished the role, how many hours per week, what your job title was, whether it was paid or voluntary, the country you worked in, and the employer and the area of work/research, and the brief description of main duties. So 200 characters, really, really small. My tip for this is, it's usually quite a small box, is to either use like a little dash so you can do bullet points, or use numbers. So I think I used numbers, like I listed my 5 or 6 main duties. And the website will then also, based on all that information you put in, calculate a full-time equivalent. So quite often the courses will say you need a minimum of 9 months full-time equivalent clinical psychology experience. But it's quite hard to calculate that if you work several part-time jobs or things like that. So the website calculates that for you based on what you put in. So that helps. You can also add in other experience in the next section as well. So before you get onto the course questions, there is a section about dissemination and publications. The question is something like, actually it says, please list any publications/dissemination resulting from your work. And they have some guidance notes available on the application now, which is great. Please leave this blank if you have not yet prepared any of your work for publication or dissemination. Again, a massive question I get asked is, but I haven't got a publication, should I just not fill it in? It is optional, but it's not just for published work in journals or magazines or things like that. The other things that you can include, as long as you have disseminated it, is service development and or audit work where you disseminate the findings. So I put about a service audit that I did, and because we did disseminate it, and we disseminated it to the execs of the board and the health board that I was working in. And it did make massive changes to the service. So I put that in there because that's really important. And it also kind of mirrors something that you do on training. Resource development. So if you have developed any resources that are used for a group or for therapy resources or things like that, that can be really valuable. And social media accounts where you disseminate psychological information. Lots of people have got them now. So that can be quite helpful to put in there. Let's think about background information, because there are a couple of optional questions with specific guidance on how to answer it. So the first one is, any information necessary to explain who you have nominated to write your suitability statements. Please leave this blank if there's nothing to explain about your choices. So if you have got your current supervisor and your master's dissertation supervisor, and they both agreed that they can provide you a reference, you don't need to add anything in here. However, if your experience suitability statement is not from your current employer, you need to explain why. If you've not worked or studied with this person in the last 3 years, you need to explain why you've nominated them. So that is a new thing, I think, since I applied. But I would have chosen my master's supervisor, and I last worked with her between 2015 and 2016. So that, when I applied in 2021/2020, I would have had to explain that. You should not normally ask for close relations, but if you are, then you need to explain and state the nature of your relationship. Again, I think that's quite risky. That would be my advice. I would say try and find somebody that is a professional. The second one is, if there are any other factors and or any further context that are relevant in assessing your application, please give details. And there are guidance notes above. I think I'm about to go through them. Please leave this blank if there's nothing further to add. So again, if you don't meet any of this, don't use this as a section where you can continue your reflections. Do not do that. That is looked upon really badly and it won't be included. But if you have a disability and you want to give further details, you can add it in here. You don't have to. It's completely your decision whether you want to disclose and how much you want to disclose. You don't have to. If you wish to give further details about the impact of socioeconomic disadvantage on the opportunities available to you during your education and or working life, you can do that. If you wish to explain any mitigating circumstances for difficulties or inconsistencies in your academic record, or extenuating circumstances that have impacted on the grades that you got, you can do that there. I think is that something I put in? No, I didn't. But you absolutely can. And if you're making a change in career and you want to give details about that, you can add that in, but you don't have to. And then also, if you've been employed by an individual or family and have that permission to name them in the experience section, you should confirm this here. So if you are talking about particular people, then and you have consent to do that, I'd add that in there. So do not use it as a space to just continue reflecting. It's really, really not good to do that. Now we move on to the course questions, which are probably the chunkiest bit of the application. And there may be some variation dependent on which courses that you've selected, but the basic questions are: in what way have your work and or research experiences made you a better candidate for for training in clinical psychology? There's 3,000 characters for this, not words, characters, which is actually quite tight. It's usually about a side of A4 typed. What would you hope to gain from training? 750 characters, which is usually 2 small paragraphs. Other information about yourself, so activities and interests apart from psychology, again 750 characters. And then just a confirmation, have you enrolled on an NHS-funded psychological professionals training commencing on or after, and the date will change each year. This is from last year. Basically, this is around you have to have had a 2-year gap at least if you have done a previous NHS-funded course. So PWP training, CWP, CAP or TAP training. Yeah, you'll need all high-intensity CBT. If it's NHS-funded, you will need to make sure you have that 2-year gap. Let's move on then to the first question, which is the one that takes the most time, probably. In what way have your work and or research experiences made you a better candidate for training in clinical psychology? Again, I've just put our applications handbook there because this is the section that we really do focus on in the handbook, to give you space to really think about it. Remember, my top tips are you cannot write about everything meaningfully, okay? There will be loads of experiences that have made you a better candidate for training, but I read so many applications that are really surface level and go, I've had this role and therefore I can do assessments, formulation and intervention. I've done this role and therefore that shows that I can do CBT. I've done this role and that means I can do service audits. It's too descriptive and it's too surface level. What you want to try and do is, this is my advice, again, you don't have to take it, is pick 3 or 4 things that you've learned and link each of those to a specific aspect of training. So placement, research, juggling multiple demands, therapy, that sort of thing. And avoid listing everything you've done. You will already have put this in your experience section. This is not about what you've done, it's about how you've learned. That it's not showing you, it's not telling you what it's not telling the person what I've done. So it's not saying I was an assistant psychologist for 18 months and I've learned about assessment and formulation and supervision. It's not listing that and telling them, it's showing them. And that's harder to do. The things that helped me then are I spent time thinking about what I wanted to write and I planned what I wanted to write before writing, and that is a way that works for me. Some people absolutely can just go into writing and that's great, but not for me. I didn't worry about the character count until I came to editing, because I found it much easier to write really freely, to write about what those experiences were and how they linked to training, and then go, that's not as strong as that. Here, take that out. Oh, I'm a bit waffly here. Let me try and make that more concise. Cut it out. That was just a process that worked well for me. I also asked a small number of people to read it. This included my friends and family to make sure that I came across, because I didn't want someone to read it and not get a sense of who I was. And I also, this is my ultimate tip, if you're ever going to show your application to anybody, I made sure that I knew what I wanted to say before I showed it to anyone. Because otherwise, in previous years, it became, oh, well, so-and-so said that I should put this in here, and so-and-so said I should do this, and so-and-so said I should do this. And then, then it's not your application, actually, it's somebody else's. So that is absolutely it. Just know what you want to write first. Know what you want to get across in your application first. And that comes with taking the time to plan and sit and think and write, before you get down to the really blank page, I'm going to write it now. Next course question then is, what would you hope to gain from training? So this is a really good place to consider writing about each of the courses that you've chosen, not kind of in turn, but hopefully you will have applied to courses that have similar ethoses and similar therapeutic modalities that they teach. But other things that you can consider are things like, do you have any specific research ideas or areas that you kind of are interested in doing on training? And I'd advise you not to write about how you want to do this massive randomized controlled trial. Probably not going to happen on training, to be realistic about it. Because part of this application is them assessing, do you understand what training is? So if you're going in there going, I would like to publish everything I ever do, and I also want to do a massive randomized controlled trial that's going to change the face of the NHS forever, it's maybe unrealistic expectations to be going in with. Do you have any clinical areas that you really want to work in? Are you really excited to work with kids? Are you really excited to potentially do some health work? And which specific competencies do you really hope to develop? What about personal growth? Is there anything about that you may want to write about? Again, the things that help me are writing really freely and then worrying about the character count afterwards. And then thinking again of narrowing down, I can't write about everything I hope to gain from training. You have to be really specific about what are the top things that you hope to gain from training. So I only wrote about 2 or 3 things that I wanted to gain because that felt like the best way of doing it. Other information about yourself, so activities or interests apart from psychology. It's a good space to show your personality and your values. And it might feel a bit like a UCAS form, like, I sing in a choir and I do loads of volunteering and I love baking and therefore I'll be a good clinical psychologist. And that's not always the way. So I'd really think about which particular things you want to show off in this section. And there is a bit of showing off. Like, it's okay to do that. It's okay to be proud of the things that you've achieved and the things that you're interested in. And one of the things that this section helps the courses to understand is, do you have a life outside of psychology? Of course we all do. But they want to know what sort of person you are, like what are you into? What it's just to get a bit more of a rounded sense of who you are. And the things that helped me is I wanted to make sure that I came across in this. So this is the section that I particularly asked friends and family to think about. So when I sent this to them, I said, okay, that is the question that I really want you to make sure that I come across. So I think I wrote about watching Formula One with my dad, as I have done since I was a baby, and finding that really restorative. I also wrote about, at the time it was COVID, and I was making loads of face masks for charity, so I wrote about that. And because that really is part of my values, is trying to, make the world a bit better for people. So it links in. So I'd really try and think about linking the values that are relevant to the course, as well as what is interesting to you. Contextual admissions. This is again something that's fairly new, relatively. Certainly wasn't really a thing when I was applying, I don't think. Certainly not as wide. This section gathers information about your educational, social and economic background, and it's then compared with POLAR data about participation of young people in higher education to contextualise your admission. First thing to say is not all courses do this. Not all courses will partake in a contextual admissions programme. Some of them are developing it, but lots of them won't. Some of them will. So thinking about which courses you're applying to, whether they will use this information, how they'll use this information could be quite useful. The questions include things like, are you the first generation in your immediate family to attend university? Did you receive free school meals during your school years? And have you been recognised as a refugee or been granted humanitarian protection? You can choose not applicable, prefer not to say. You do not have to disclose anything that you're not comfortable with. Documents then. So to apply, you have to attach a range of documents. If you forget, for some reason, if that ever happens, Clearinghouse should email you and just double check that you can attach them. But I would just make sure that you know which documents you need to attach and make sure you attach them. So as I say, you will be required to attach some, and there will be some variation dependent on which courses you apply to. But the typical documents are a letter or document confirming your graduate basis for chartership, a degree transcript, or any other higher education transcript that shows kind of what grades you got. Some courses like to have you get at least 65% in research modules, things like that. So you might need your degree transcript and your certificate as well. But you may be asked to upload your full UK valid driving licence, proof of English language proficiency based on which English language course pass certificate thing that university will accept. You may also be asked to upload your A-level or equivalent certificates. So, as I say, when you've chosen your courses, go onto their website or use our course comparison guide and check which documents you need to upload. Have a list, make sure they're uploaded, and then you can get on with your application. You can attach your documents at any time. So I tended to do mine then and there, and I kept checking that they were there and that they hadn't disappeared somewhere. You'll also be asked to provide some demographic information, and this is usually, so Clearinghouse can do some analysis on it. You don't have to do this or consent to it. But if you do, you're asked to give information about your age, your gender, your country of permanent residence, marital status, disability status, religion, and ethnic group. So that is how to do the application. That's how to go through it. I just want to go through some final tips that hopefully will be helpful and will make sense based on everything that we've spoken about. And honestly, the most common feedback that I give on applications are these things. So, firstly, show, don't tell. Use the first course question to be reflective, not descriptive about your experiences. One of the things that can help with that is using a very vague structure of what, so what, now what. So, what was the thing that you've learned? So what? How did you learn it? What does it mean? Now what? How does it link to training? There's a good structure for you for each of your points, each of your paragraphs. But actually, if you think, the other thing is, if you read it and you go, could any other applicant have written this? And if they could, change it. This is about you. You know, any applicant has got experience of doing assessments, probably. You know, is that the thing that you really want to highlight? Or is there something about doing assessments that you found difficult or that you've overcome? You know, is it managing risk? Is it something, you know, a particular experience you've had? Really think about that. I'd use some reflective models. Play around with some reflective models before you start writing and see what comes out when you think about the experiences you've had. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about reflective models is because in my 5th application, my 2nd interview, in total, I was unsuccessful, but I was given the feedback from interview that I needed to use some reflective models to better understand my experiences and to be able to talk about them in a more kind of in a way that kind of carried a bit more depth. So using reflective models is never going to damage you. It's never going to harm you. The only thing that's going to cost you is time. So playing around with some reflective models, and I've done loads of videos on what reflective models are, so you can have a little look. But yeah, playing around with those is only going to help your application, and it's only going to help your interviews if you get one. So definitely start playing around with those. I would also say to take your time to choose your courses. So many people I review applications for choose courses, that don't meet the minimum that you don't meet the minimum criteria for. So they apply to courses where they need a driving license but don't have one, or they don't have a 2-1 and they need one. You know, don't make this mistake. It's such a waste of your time and money. Like, don't make that mistake. Make sure you choose courses that fit you and that you fit them as well. And also be kind to yourself. You know, I know that's such a phrase at the moment, but if the outcome of the application is not what you wanted, like I had 5 times, remember that it's so competitive and you might need to review your application to find areas for improvement. Sometimes you will meet the minimum criteria. That does not mean you're going to get an interview, sadly. It just doesn't now. And sometimes it's getting a bit more experience. Sometimes it's about making the most of your experience on the application. You know, if it was just about how much experience you had, you'd all get through. But it's not. It's about what you make of your experience. You know, so that's often where people come unstuck. They think, but I've got 9 months experience. But if you're not making the most of it in your application, that's what it's about. The other thing is taking your time. Like, absolutely, I know how it was all through my 20s. I was like, I need to get on. I just want to get on and progress my career. And I don't want to be living on this damn poor wage anymore. And I just want to get on. I get that. But there's something to be said about taking your time. Is this the right time to apply? Secondly, in a kind of more microcosm version of that, actually, you've got till November. All right, you've got time. Take your time. Having fresh eyes can be really helpful. And I would say take a few breaks in between writing it. Write it every, couple of times a week, 3 times a week, rather than every single day, because you need some time to kind of process and reflect and digest what you've written and what you want to write. So fresh eyes can be really helpful. Don't ask too many people to review it. And this is, I really do believe in this. And people often say, how many people should I get? I think it depends. What I would say always, like I said before, is make sure you know what you want to say. If you know what you want to say, then that's really helpful, because if someone gives you feedback saying, I don't think that should be in there, but you think really strongly that you want to put it in there, it stays. You don't want your voice to become diluted. And what I would do is also share it in stages. So you don't have to share it with everybody all at once. You can get it to a place where you feel quite happy with it, and then go, I've got 2 or 3 people I can send it to. Okay, I'll send it to them and see what they think. Okay, I've got some feedback, I've got some things to think about. How did that feel to send it to people? Was that comfortable? Was it not? Actually, it was all right. Okay, maybe I'll send it to a few more once I've made those changes. You don't have to do it all at once. Also, this is a big one for me. It's all in the plan. Writing can be easier once you plan what you want to say. I know everyone always used to go on like this when we were writing essays at school. Make sure you plan it. Take time to plan. But it's really helpful, actually. Get the basics right. I cannot tell you how much time I spend looking at applications, giving this piece of advice. And I always ask people, have you watched the videos? And the reason for that is because I give you this information. It's a waste of my time to be looking through applications where people are not getting this stuff right, because it's the basics. It's the very, very basics. Don't use acronyms unless you're writing them out first. So I see loads of people write MDT. You might get away with it. You might not. If I was shortlisting, that would be really important to me, because it's formal academic writing. You're applying to a doctorate. You need to make sure that this stuff is right. You will probably get away with NHS. You might get away with CBT, but you will need to write them out, really. Ensure you aren't using contractions. So again, formal academic writing should not be don't, it should be do not, or can't, cannot. Aren't, are not. You must write it out properly. Numbers is another pet peeve of mine. Numbers 1 to 9 should be written as words. So exactly as I have there. 10 can be written either in words or figures, and numbers over 10 can be written in figures. So make sure, again, it's such a small thing, right? But we are talking about tiny margins here. And some courses might talk about, in the shortlisting, they might provide you with scores. The shortlisters might be able to award scores for whether there are any typos or whether any of this stuff is violated. They might be able to do that. So why give them the opportunity to reject you just because of this basic stuff? Don't start a sentence with an acronym or number in figures. So don't start a sentence saying MDT working has given me blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. It's formal writing. Can't do it. So get those basics right. It's so important. And because the thing is, it's not just about the application. You have to get this stuff right when you're going through the doctorate, because they will mark you down. You have to get it right. And it will always be a correction. So make sure you get it right. Just get it right. So they are my top tips. And we do have loads of resources available on our shop. You can email me for free copies of most of our resources. All the details are on there. And we also do have loads of resources on Facebook and videos on YouTube. We have our Instagram as well. So please do make sure that you check it out and subscribe, because it does make a massive difference to running the platform. Any questions, do drop them in the comments below. But I really do wish you the very best of luck. And hopefully you've got all the skills that you need to write your best DClinPsy application. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.